Listen. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a city of sand and silk, where the air smells of jasmine and gunpowder, where courtyards whisper of treaties and teapots hold the warmth of 100 winters. Imagine a carriage unlike any other, its radiator like the crown of a sleeping king, its coachwork gleaming like a story told in gold. This is not merely a machine. It is a promise, a proclamation, a mirror held up to the face of power. The year is a number in an old notebook. The road is a ribbon of dust. And the man who steps from the carriage is not simply a ruler. He is a testament to a vanished era, to dignity that will not be bargained away. He arrives in London as one might step into a cathedral of metal and velvet, a sovereign visiting another country's temples. The showroom is a sanctum of polish and protocol. Salesmen in waistcoats move like stewards around the metal lions and the silvered faces. They are skilled at the delicate dance between desire and disdain. They have answers for the curious and smiles for the wealthy. Yet there, beneath the gas-lit arch of the Rolls-Royce Emporium, a moment occurs that tempers pride into a different metal. A curt remark, a glance misread, an offhand dismissal meant for a stranger. Words are small things, and sometimes they are heavy enough to tilt empires. Our Nawab does not roar. He does not humiliate. He collects his dignity like a cloak and returns home with a quiet resolve. He will not forget the slight. He will translate humiliation into resolve, and resolve into action. Back in Bahawalpur the sun is a slow gold wheel, and the Nawab's palace reads like a map of histories, rooms that remember treaties, gardens that know the rhythm of courtly footsteps. He instructs his aides without theatrics. 6 carriages, the same make and model that had been withheld from him in that distant showroom, are to be secured. If the world insists on measuring worth by the slenderness of a curt smile, then he will teach the world another lesson. That dignity can be delivered by deeds, not by words. When the Rolls-Royce coaches arrive in Bahawalpur, they are not merely automobiles. They are statements that rattle the comfortable assumptions of an empire. The sight of such cars in the Nawab's convoy turns heads and sketches new maps of gossip. But the Nawab's intent with them is not merely possession. With an iron thread of compassion and a poet's understanding of spectacle, he instructs that these machines join the city's humble and necessary tasks, sweeping the streets, clearing the paths where people move and children play. The image itself is a parable. A vehicle that in another world is a symbol of privilege becomes, under his command, a servant of the people. The action is both practical and theatrical. Practical because streets are cleaned, theatrical because the gesture rewrites assumptions, that honor is not held to the chest but shared with the road. People watch and whisper. Some call it vengeance dressed as benevolence. Others call it a demonstration of humility high enough to be mistaken for magnanimity. News travels oddly in those days, by horse, by telegram, by the reverent cadence of conversation at tea tables. The story arrives in London not as a mere dispatch but as a stain on a carefully curated image. For a company whose reputation is woven in silver threads and silky promises, the idea that its product is being employed to sweep dust off a foreign road is a brand crisis that must be managed. Reputation, after all, is a fragile thing. It is as apt to crack as glass when pressure is applied with rumor. And so the story goes. The heads of the House of Rolls-Royce learn of this unexpected chapter. They are men who understand that sometimes commerce requires humility, as much as it demands respect. Representatives are sent across the seas, not merely to make restitution, but to preserve the narrative that their creations sit only in places of ceremonial reverence. They arrive with apologies carried as carefully as silver cases, and at the heart of their offering are cars fashioned anew, a symbolic sleight of hand meant to smooth over the scratch on an otherwise immaculate finish. They present gifts. They bow in corporate language. They attempt to stitch back the torn embroidery of esteem. This is the version told in parlors and printed in newspapers that have outlived their paper. It is the story that children later hear as moral fable, a tale about pride, about justice, about the metamorphosis of humiliation into a lesson of dignity. Yet history loves complexity. The archive is often quieter, and its evidence demands care. When scholars look for receipts and telegrams, for factory logs or photographs that frame the exact choreography of that transaction, the trail thins. What remains is a tapestry of memory, threaded by the hands of those who told the tale best. Oral history has the stubbornness of seeds. It finds soil where official documents have not been sown. The people's story grows tall because it comforts and it puzzles in equal measure. But beyond the tangle of proof and poetry, there is something more truthful than a bill of sale or a press release. There is the moral cadence of the Nawab's action. Whether or not the Rolls-Royce house sent emissaries with apologies in their pockets, the image of a sovereign turning a luxury into public service reframes power in a way that many official records cannot capture. History sometimes requires poetic truths, moments that, even if not all recorded to the letter, contain within them the essential movement of human character. The legend stands because it satisfies a longing for leaders who convert arrogance into restitution, for aristocrats who show their authority by giving to the many. Let us speak, then, of the Nawab himself, a man born into a line of men who held sway over a corner of a subcontinent, who traced their duty through both sword and supplication. He was a patron of scholarship, a guardian of shrines, a keeper of pacts with British administrators and neighboring princes alike. To understand his decision, whether fueled by pride, principle, or politics, we must imagine the fine grain of a ruler's life. Each public action echoes in private chambers. Each gesture in service or spectacle is a calculation and a confession. When one of his cars swept a royal street, it may have been to restore a balance, to answer an insult with a lesson, or to assert a simpler, humbler truth, that dignity spoken loudly is less valuable than dignity put to common use. There are voices who will say this was a stunt, others will declare it an act of genial contempt. But perhaps it is more useful to think of it as a reclaiming of narrative, of self, and of how the symbols of power function. The Rolls-Royce itself, with its spirit of ecstasy poised like a guardian over the radiator, becomes an instrument of a different theology of rule, one that insists power's legitimacy comes not from exclusivity but from service. The symbolism cannot be dismissed. Even in its performative streak, it contains the seed of a politics that feels rare and necessary. When you tell this story on camera, when your viewers watch the shadow of the Nawab step from one of those carriages and then direct its majestic body toward cleaning the city's lanes, they will hear more than an anecdote. They will hear an idea. They will hear that dignity can be redirected from ceremony to public good, that symbols can be repurposed to wash away both dust and disdain. And in that repurposing is an invitation. What other artifacts of privilege might be turned toward the service of streets and schools and hospitals? What other monuments might be reimagined as instruments of daily care? So let us close this sequence with an image. Dusk settles over Bahawalpur, a hush where the citadel breathes, and the Rolls-Royce's metallic skin reflects a sky that has forgotten the insult and remembers only the effort. A worker leans on a broom made humble by use but dignified by purpose. He laughs with a child who chases a paper boat along a gutter that has just been cleared. The Nawab watches from a balcony not for applause but for the small, honest smiles that the city returns. Perhaps that is the truest resolution of the tale, not the arrival of a corporate envoy with gifts, but the simple recalibration of what a symbol is allowed to do. History will keep adding pages to this story, some lined with fact, some with the lush ink of legend. Your viewers will carry the version that moves them most, the one with corporate contrition and gilded apologies, or the one where a sovereign's quiet rebellion rewrites a brand's image. Both versions serve a purpose. Both insist on remembering that in the architecture of power, there is room, if one chooses, for humility. In the days that follow, Bahawalpur begins to shimmer with talk. The desert wind carries not only sand but stories, of silver engines humming where ox carts once moved, of streets where once only dust danced now being swept by vehicles that once ferried princes. The people of the city gather at corners, whispering, laughing, bewildered. Some believe it is divine justice, others call it a play staged for pride. But in the quiet of the palace, where marble floors remember the weight of generations, the Nawab walks alone. His footsteps echo through corridors where portraits of ancestors look down in oil and shadow. He is not a man obsessed with machines, he is a man aware of what they mean. A Rolls-Royce, to the world, is more than metal, it is a statement of hierarchy. To him, it is now a mirror of arrogance. And yet, he does not hate the car. He has only changed its purpose. The irony, he muses, is that beauty must sometimes bow to usefulness to prove its true worth. He writes a note for the city council. Let these cars serve where they were never meant to serve. Let them carry dust until the air is clear again. The engines start early each morning. The city awakens to the hum of 12 cylinders where once only crows called. Drivers wear simple uniforms. They move through the narrow lanes, their hands steady, their expressions half nervous, half proud. Children run alongside, laughing, shouting, touching the wheels as though touching legend. For them, it is not punishment or protest, it is wonder. For the elders, it is poetry. The hum of the cars becomes the rhythm of a new kind of justice. But thousands of miles away, in London, the ripple of this act becomes a storm in polished boardrooms. The newspapers pick up the rumor first. Rolls-Royce cars used for street cleaning in Bahawalpur. Headlines bloom across tabloids and trade journals alike. For the elite British readers, it is both shocking and strangely entertaining. For the company, it is a wound to prestige. Rolls-Royce, the untouchable, the unmatched, the unsoiled, now shares its name with dust and brooms. The chairman calls an emergency meeting. Faces grow pale as they imagine the loss of reputation in colonies and courts alike. If the Nawab of Bahawalpur, one of their most illustrious clients, is offended enough to turn their symbol of royalty into a servant, what might other rulers think? The company's foreign relations manager, a thin man with spectacles like twin moons, is summoned. "You will go," says the chairman, "and you will return with our honor intact." He nods. He has read of Bahawalpur, a kingdom of heat and gold, where honor sits higher than the throne. He understands that this will not be a negotiation of money but of respect. Weeks later, a Rolls-Royce representative ship cuts across the Arabian Sea. Inside, letters of apology are folded like fragile prayers. 6 brand new cars are secured in wooden crates, the gleaming reconciliation offerings from the House of Rolls-Royce to the House of Bahawalpur. The journey is long, the stakes are higher than trade. When the ship reaches Karachi and the emissary steps onto the dock, the air is thick with the scent of spice and intrigue. In Bahawalpur, preparations for the envoy's arrival are modest, by order of the Nawab himself. He has no interest in spectacle. The emissary is received in the cool shadows of a veranda, where the Nawab sits in a white sherwani, his turban gleaming faintly under the afternoon light. Their meeting begins without pleasantries. The emissary speaks first, carefully, politely, in the clipped rhythm of a man who knows every word is being weighed. "Your Excellency," he begins, "we have come not to defend, but to understand. The misunderstanding in London's showroom has caused us much regret. Our founders would not wish such a thing upon a gentleman of your standing. Please accept our sincerest apologies, and these vehicles, crafted anew, as a gesture of goodwill." The Nawab listens without a flicker of expression. Then, slowly, he rises and steps toward the edge of the veranda. The sound of the desert wind returns, carrying the faint hum of those very cars at work in the city beyond. "You mistake my purpose," he says quietly. "I did not humiliate your company. I taught it humility. There is a difference." His voice is calm, but it carries the gravity of centuries. When an empire measures worth by possession, it forgets that even luxury must serve. The emissary bows, unsure whether he has been forgiven or further instructed. "Your Excellency," he murmurs, "may we hope that your city will no longer use our cars for such tasks?" The Nawab smiles, not cruelly, but as one who has seen the vanity of men laid bare. "Perhaps," he says, "when every street is clean enough to reflect the sky, then they may rest." He turns away, leaving the emissary standing beneath arches that frame both pride and peace. The crates of new Rolls-Royces are later placed in the palace garages, gleaming beside the older ones. Some are driven in royal processions, others remain unused, like medals awarded for lessons well taught. Over time, the story transforms. The facts blur, the details shift, the moral sharpens. It ceases to be about a car or a company, it becomes about something else, the balance between pride and dignity, between power and grace. When later generations tell it, they tell it not as news but as legend. They tell it because it gives shape to a longing, that somewhere, once, a man of power refused to be small in the face of insult, and yet refused to shout. He simply turned arrogance into service and let the world draw its conclusions. In the palace archives, among letters, treaties, and photographs, a note is found decades later in the Nawab's hand. The ink has faded, but the words remain. Respect is not owned, it is earned. And if the world forgets, then let the roads remind them. Years pass, and the world begins to forget the insult, the apology, the spectacle of steel and dust. Empires rise and fold into their own shadows. The roads that once trembled under the weight of the Nawab's command now hum with the ordinary traffic of an independent nation finding its feet. Yet, In Bahawalpur, the memory lingers, not as arrogance, but as pride refined into legend. Visitors come and go. Some come to see the palaces of sandstone and marble, others to glimpse the remnants of a royal garage where, under white sheets, the ghosts of Rolls-Royce engines sleep. The caretakers speak softly, reverently. These are not just cars, they say. These are stories. When the covers are lifted, the light falls differently, as though time itself pauses to admire what men once built and what pride once taught. The city too remembers in quiet ways. The streets once cleaned by those royal machines are wider now, busier, yet they hold an invisible echo. The children who once chased the silver wheels are now grandfathers who tell the tale to their own grandchildren. There was a time, they begin, when our ruler taught the British what respect truly means. The children's eyes widen, not because of the cars, but because of the courage. The story is no longer about Rolls-Royce, it has become a symbol of how one man turned humiliation into heritage. Meanwhile, across the oceans, in boardrooms with glass walls and carpets that muffle guilt, Rolls-Royce learns from its own past. The tale of Bahawalpur becomes an internal parable whispered among its executives. Some deny it ever happened. Others cite it as the reason the company began treating every customer, regardless of nation or color, as royalty. The story becomes a mirror for them too, one that reflects not just luxury, but the delicate balance between reputation and respect. In the late twilight of his years, the Nawab often sat upon the balcony of his palace, watching the horizon burn orange over the Khalistan desert. His advisors still brought reports, his people still sought counsel, yet there was a softness in him that only time teaches. He spoke rarely of London, of Rolls-Royce, of insult or vindication. Perhaps, deep within, he understood that the greatest revenge is not retaliation but transformation. What he had done was no longer defiance, it had become philosophy. To those who asked him why he had done it, he sometimes replied, because pride that cannot serve others is not pride, it is vanity. One evening, a visiting journalist from England sat before him, his notebook trembling with the weight of curiosity. "Your Highness," he asked softly, "did you truly order the Rolls-Royce cars to clean your streets?" The Nawab smiled faintly, his eyes distant, shimmering with memory. "Does it matter," he said, "whether I did or not? What matters is that the world believes a prince once humbled a symbol of empire, not with anger, but with purpose. That belief is more powerful than any truth you could print." The journalist looked down, unsure how to answer. The Nawab leaned back, his gaze on the horizon again. "Sometimes," he continued, "a legend is the only truth the world deserves." Time carried him away quietly, as it carries all men of stories. The palaces grew quieter, the photographs faded, but the tale endured. Every few years, somewhere in the world, a headline reappears, "The Nawab who made Rolls-Royce sweep his streets." It finds new life on lips that never knew the man, on screens glowing with curiosity, in documentaries and YouTube videos watched by millions. And in every retelling, the moral remains untouched, that respect, when demanded, weakens, but when earned through grace, it becomes eternal. Today, as we stand in an age where machines once again define prestige, electric cars, futuristic engines, the same dance of pride and possession, the story of Bahawalpur returns as a whisper from the past. It reminds us that technology is temporary, but dignity is timeless. That a true ruler's power is not in what he owns, but in what he can transform. If you listen closely, you can still hear the faint echo of those engines somewhere in the desert wind, a hum not of arrogance, but of purpose. The silver bodies that once touched dust taught the world something no machine could express, that even the finest creation becomes divine when it serves humanity. As night settles over Bahawalpur, the stars spread like scattered diamonds across the velvet sky. The palace windows gleam faintly, reflecting the soft moonlight. Inside, one of the old Rolls-Royce cars still stands under a white cover. On its bonnet, the spirit of ecstasy glows dimly, as if remembering her journey from pride to humility, from insult to immortality. And in that silence lies the heartbeat of a story that never really ended. Because legends, like engines well cared for, never truly stop running. They only rest until the world is ready to listen again.